So we're going to be, again, going about the mechanics of developing our purpose statement. And in doing so, what we are going to be doing, or what the author has actually designed the design for this process to work is that we need to now connect the dots with all of the 5 contexts of your life. And we've gone over the first 7 chapters of the book has to do with understanding the 5 various contexts in our life. Now, we also mentioned last couple of classes, and I want to reiterate this because as we go through the mechanics, in order to do these mechanics successfully, you need to understand this particular, the reason why, the reason behind this particular exercises. Now, the 5 contexts of our purpose, the 5 contexts that we are addressing now, they serve 3 purposes for us in our life. The first purpose is it helps us to realize and to be conscious of who we are. We started our journey from that perspective. Then it helps us to recognize, to recall again, not only who we are, but the origin of from where we come, where we have come. And then this process also is designed for us to renew. And we're going to really drill down on this a little further as we go through the mechanics of this. You need to understand that this series of exercises is designed for the purpose of the renewing of your mind. Now we know that the Bible talks about that. Paul talks about that we are not to be conformed to what? This world. But notice when he says we are not to be, or you are not to be conformed to the world. In what ways are you conformed to the world? In what ways are we conformed to the world? And yes, that is true. It is by following the patterns of this world. But what does it mean to follow the pattern? In what ways do we follow the patterns of this world? Worldly thinking. And in what way do we think worldly? Primarily, we think worldly when we see ourselves and we identify ourselves as being in the world or from the world. And not having our minds renewed to the fact that we didn't come from this world. We are in the world, but we're not of it. And so it gets back to being renewed in our mind to understand this primary principle. It gets back to understanding our identity. It's back to an identity. How do you see yourself? And many of us still, when we look back over our lives, especially these 5 contexts gives us a lifeline of how our lives are, or what our lives consist of. And so we've learned that what's going to be required then in doing these exercises, it is very difficult for some to actually go through the process of really dealing with these 5 questions. Because in doing so, what happens is most of us still, when we look at the entirety of our lives, we look at our lives in such a way to where we have been convinced, because we have a paradigm that informs who we are and what has occurred in our lives based on the world. When I say based on the world, we look at our lives separate from the purpose of God for our lives. And so when we begin to take into account all of the circumstances behind our lives, we still look at our lives and want to compare our lives with what has occurred or didn't occur. We look at our lives and measure it based on other people's lives and not on God's unique purpose that he had for me in my life. Understanding that there is nothing that has happened to me in my life that hasn't been according to God's purpose for my life. Okay? And so, this quote I love, it says, you have to leave, this process of going through the mechanics is going to require all of us to leave the city of the comfort of your comfort and go into the wilderness of your intuition. And you're going to see this even more so when we go into this exercise. It's going to require all of us to be more thoughtful, think more deeply about the contexts of our life. Come right on in. Sister Neil, why don't you, your niece there. Amen. It's going to require all of us to think more deeply about our lives in a way that they are connected to God's purpose. And the end result is we will discover, you're going to discover, I'm going to discover myself. And I would say this, many of us are on a journey of really discovering who we are. There are many people who live a longevity of life in their life and never discover who they really are. And when I don't take the time to really go through this process, what happens is in my life, rather than live the life that God has purposed for me to live, what we ultimately end up doing is imitating the life of somebody else or somebody else's purpose that they may have communicated that we should have for our own lives. So, that being said, here is the reason why we want to do this purpose statement again. We got to understand that we have been created and designed in such a way that our mind, the soul of ourselves, the mind is built in a way, if you don't image a future inside it, your being, your soul, it is programmed to immediately retrieve the past. If you don't go through the process of making deposits to your soul, designing and imaging a future inside it, it is programmed to immediately retrieve the past. That's why many of our lives, many people's lives, consist of actually going through these cycles of repetitive sabotage, repetitive behaviors that may have been born in family systems. I remember, again, at 18 years old, when I was about to graduate from high school, again, all I remember is me going through a process right before graduation, all of my senior year. I began to think, because I was raised in such a way in my family, once you graduated, you out. I mean, that's how I was raised. And so I had to really think real seriously about what it is that I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I didn't have a mentor or any person in my life to kind of help me navigate that at that particular time. And so I began to think, I began to pray. I was a Christian, young teenager, trying to make its way. But here is the thing that I know, now looking back. God resonates in all of our heart because we came out of him. There was something God was calling me to, even though I didn't have the clarity of what that was. And one of the things that became clear to me is when I looked at my own family system, it became apparent to me that God was, for some reason, he chose me to be the transitionary person in my family system. Nobody had graduated from high school at that point. I was the first one. No one has attended college. I was the first one. And when I began to look at the type of man that I wanted to become, didn't know my daddy at all growing up biologically until I was about to go to college. And something came up in my spirit, didn't know where it was coming from, but I had this sense of needing to know who he was. So after 18 years of living, I had a conversation with my mama for the first time about my father. All I knew about him at the time was his name that was on my birth certificate. And so I asked her, we had some conversations that we never had all of my childhood life, found out who he was, and looked him up for the first time at 18. From that, what I began to do is to study, and I decided that I would not be the type of father that he was. And then I learned a little bit about him, and I began to see that there was a pattern of alcoholism, drug abuse, divorce, and the like in my family system. And at that point, the definitive thing that I was able to determine about God's purpose for my life is that I was being called to actually be a transition person in my life. And so I began to plan a future. But notice the statement here. If you don't image, we are created in the image and likeness of God. That simply means we're designed to function like God. We live out of our imagination. Our lives right now, your lives right now, is a product of what you've been imagining in your mind your life to be. And God has brought us to a point to now where we become intentional about looking at and understanding with clarity our life so we can begin to imagine our life based on His purpose for our life. And that becomes our future. Now notice this, point 2. People who live in the past are people who never have given their mind permission to dream of a future. People who live in the past. Most people, and we're going to see through this exercise, most people spend their lives based on what has happened to them in the past. They can't imagine a future for their life because they're stuck in the past. They continue to rehearse all of the things that has gone on and what happened and what didn't happen, and they begin to see themselves as a victim to the past. Therefore, they can't plan out the future that God has for their life. And so, we need to understand our future that God has for us is greater than our past. But that's only going to happen by us actually being intentional, by identifying and developing, looking at these 5 contexts, answering the questions here, because what they're going to do, they're going to reveal to us what our real identity is. We started out in chapter 1 identifying the importance of identity. Now here we are now after chapter 7 and 8. Here is the bookend. The bookend, we started with this notion, and now we're going to end with this notion. Our true identity, who we are and where we're going at this point, being awakened to that reality, understanding that we have been born from above. Okay? Now, we passed out these sheets last class. Anyone that was not here last class, if I can get somebody to help me, Brother Dixon, he'll help me out, Brother Watt. Those who have the hand raised, if you'll get that to them. Okay? Now, we're going to continue the process There are those who have been working on this. Okay. Who doesn't have one? Okay. We're out. These are the same 5 questions, by the way. These are the 5 different contexts. I'll get more copies. The copy machine was broken this morning. There was another handout I wanted to give this morning and was not able to do. So, as a result of the copy machine being gone, okay? Being inoperable. Here is the thing that we're doing with this exercise is we're learning how to write a purpose statement. And in writing this purpose statement, we want you to know that Jesus has always served as our model, and he continues to do so. Jesus, even in his own life, implemented a purpose statement. He indicated a purpose statement in the form of a I am statement. Y'all do recall that Jesus spoke several times that I am. Y'all recall that? Jesus knew his identity and his purpose, and he communicated this multiple times through these statements of I am. And by creating your purpose statement, you are essentially creating an emotional anchor for yourself, rooted in your God-given destiny. So here is the thing that you need to understand as you complete this. What you're doing by completing this purpose statement, you are creating an emotional anchor for yourself, rooted in your God-given identity. Having a purpose statement means you are clear on your strengths, and your strengths are hardwired in your design. It gives you clarity on your strengths, and your strengths, you're going to learn, are hardwired in your design. How many of you all remember when we started out our journey, we used the example of understanding the cell phone? We know that when we showed up, God completed us, and he equipped us with everything that we needed. This phone, when the manufacturer put it out for use, it wasn't lacking anything. It's already hardwired to perform like he created it to perform. And so your purpose statement actually is an affirmation of who you are and the strengths that God has already hardwired you to perform and function. Okay? And so you need to know who you are, and you will be able to identify who you are through the purpose statement that you're going to design for your life. Okay? So these 5 questions happen to do with the 5 contexts of your life, and we begin encouraging everybody to fill them out, and we began taking responses to the last class that we made. Give us a few minutes. We started with the understanding what is the context of your creation, and we began to go around the room and take some responses. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to allow a couple of minutes for us to go to question number 2. What is the context of your calling? Those of you who have answers to this question, I'm going to give a couple of minutes for you to reflect on that. And those who have not answered the question, I'm going to give you a few minutes just to look over and get your thoughts. And we're going to come back here in a moment when I stop this song, and we're going to talk about some of the responses to the answer to the question of what is the context of your call. So I'm going to give just a couple of minutes, and we'll come back. Those of you who have answered this question, please be ready to share. And those who have not begun to answer your questions, we're going to give you a few minutes to go ahead and do that. Okay? Sister Wilson. All righty. Okay, context of your calling. Context of your calling. Who wants to pick up and share what they have discovered as it relates to the context of your calling? Context of your calling. Y'all all speak at the same time. Okay, let's come over to this table right here.
I put that I love teaching, and I especially love teaching children and helping bring concepts to life for them. And this is something that I did as a kid when I was playing in the yard. All of the neighbor kids would come over, and I would have sheets for them, and I would always pretend I was a teacher. So it's something that I've always loved doing from a kid.
Okay, so you feel in the context of your God calling, you teaching is something that you can identify with from a very early age. Okay. I saw Sister Watson had her hand up over there.
So my first part is similar. I always wanted to teach. I didn't have friends in the neighborhood, so I lined up my dolls and my teddy bears and assigned homework, helped them do their homework, graded their homework. They made A's. But later in my adult life, in addition to that, I'm feeling called to encourage the least, the last, and the left out. And that is in direct reaction to how I felt growing up. And so I guess that kind of goes along with the context of your crisis. But I want to use that in my teaching as well, reaching those students that think that they're not.
Okay, for those who may not understand the language that you just mentioned, can you just clarify real quickly? When you say the least, the last, and the lost, would you explain what you mean by that?
So for me, the least, the last, and the left out, these are the ones that either they don't think they're worth anything, where my students are concerned, they've been told they're stupid, or they believe they're stupid, they believe that their life isn't worth anything. When I use it with adults, it's people that have had a hard life and think that they're not worthy of anything good. And these are the people I feel drawn to.
All right. So very good. Let's give them two a love deposit. Anybody else who want to share with us context of your calling? Context of your call. Brother Joseph is right here with Mike.
Just want to kind of make a statement here, right? 2 weeks ago, right? Or 2 weeks ago, I was walking in the indoor gym on this, and a statement just came out like it blew like this. And it had something to do with my calling, right? And then just read what exactly came out, like a flash, right? And it was said to develop people financially so that they can become good stewards of all resources. I just came up like a flash list in a blue like that, right? But I tend to want to help people financially, make them manage their resources better or do something in that area, and that's why I want to tackle it. But I have a deeper calling, showing people how they can tap into certain resources like stock market and create a better future for themselves. And I tend to sometimes share that with people, I think, get financially literate. Working a job is great, but there's no guarantee that one day you could just walk into buy a brand new car cash. But getting financially literate by learning about stock investments and so on, I think you have a greater chance of realizing financial goals than thinking that you can get rich working a job 8 to 5.
Okay. And Brother Joseph communicated, and we're going to get with Sister Neal, that he feels, just the other day, you begin to kind of think about answering these questions, and something came up within you as you walked, and it had...
I just came out, I don't wait like a flash. The whole sentence like a flash. I was just walking.
Yes.
And this came out like that.
And this is going to happen, I'm glad he mentioned this. The more those who actually take the time to really engage in what we're talking about, what we talked about, and what we left you with last class is based on, just being reminded, last Sunday's class, Brother Roach was talking about one of the greatest gifts that we have with us that we don't utilize is that of the gift of the what? Holy Spirit. And his function, again, his function is, according to John 16, verse 13, we learned is what? One of his functions is that he is a what? It's in John 16, 13. See, John 16, 13. Holy. Oh.
You will hear the spirit of truth.
What is that, Brother Babe? He is, one of his functions is to serve, to guide us. Notice his function is that of a guide. He is to guide us. He's to guide you. Notice, don't miss the purpose of what a guide does. The purpose of a guide. He is to guide you into all truth. So as we go about the process of discovering who we are, Holy Spirit is there, notice, to guide us, to guide you. And in order for a guide to be effective, a guide has to have gone already to where it is that he is guiding you in order to guide you. You can't go to the museum and, of your kind, and they, some of these big museums, they have guides. If they had never trained a guide to go through all the stations that they're going to take you, he couldn't be, or she couldn't be a guide. In order to be a guide, the assumption is that the person has already been to the place where he or she is to take you. The Holy Spirit was there when God created you. He knows your life. He knows the plan. And again, this is where when we go through this process, our minds have to be renewed to see ourselves from our real, true identity. Which is to say, my life didn't happen when I was born. My life didn't begin on May 27, 1959, when Rosie Jackson birthed Randy Jackson. My life began in eternity with God. God chose Rose and Roosevelt to bring me into this world for his purpose. And the Holy Spirit now is designed to be my guide as I go through this process of these questions, of reminding me of the context of my creation, why it is that I was born in him, and what God had in mind about my life before I got here. So as you go through this process and you really engage the Holy Spirit, what's going to happen is each one of these contexts, the Holy Spirit is going to actually give you clarity, and you'll have those flash moments where he begins to help you understand and get meaning behind the occurrences in your life as it relates to these 5 contexts. Everybody? I got another little exercise that I'm going to give us that's going to even make this process even a little more simplified. Sister Neil, go right ahead.
The context of my calling to me is to counsel and encourage change in others' lives. You know, growing up, when I was in school, I was always the go-to girl. You know, when friends were, going through something or things were going on at home, they always trusted me enough and to come and talk to me, and I was able to encourage them, and that things would get better. And I was the one that the girls that were extra heavy, that didn't like their weight, and people talked about them, or the kids that didn't have the nice clothes and stuff like that. Well, I took those kind of people up under my wing, not because I felt sorry for them, but because I felt like that I could make them feel better. And I'm still that way today. I counsel for substance abuse, and I'm very open and honest with these people, about life, about a life of change, that I feel like that I'm doing something good, and that also that I'm planting a seed, a seed that they can grow, and also on the same token, trying to lead them to Christ, and let them know how I got where I am today.
Amen. Okay. I'm going to make sure that everybody can everybody see that? I had intended to have a handout, and I couldn't print it out this morning because of the printers not working. But I'm going to have a printout for us on Wednesday where this little diagram you can use this to coincide with here in helping to give you in an easier way the clarity that you need about your life and what God has been doing in your life ever since you were born up until this present time. What this represents a lifeline, a lifeline time frame based on your life. And here's what we want you to do. This will give you a quick snapshot of your life journey from this point on. In our life's journey, all of us in these 5 contexts have experienced love deposits, love withdrawals. Love deposits, love withdrawals. And on the love deposit side, that means those are the things that have occurred in our lives that have been successful. Every human being has had moments in their life where they've had pleasurable experiences. And then all of us also have had withdrawal experiences. Now, in the pleasurable, in both cases, what happens is these become emotional reference points for our lives. Okay? And what I want us to do, the next handout that we're going to do, actually you can begin doing this without the handout. I want you to take into into the account 3 areas of your life, which these 5 contexts actually cover. I want you to look at your personal history. All of our lives consist of our personal history, our professional history, and then our spiritual history. We've had experiences, personal experiences, we've had professional experiences, and we've had spiritual experiences. And in each one of these areas, we've had love deposits, and we've had love withdrawals in each one of those areas. And here's the thing that I want you to do, is to begin to go back and chart your life. Start with your personal history. Think of any personal success that you've had that was positive, and begin to make a note of that above this line. From your earliest existence, personal experience, from your personal life, okay? And then after, list on a piece of paper, first of all of the positive things you can think about just that has happened to you in your personal life, from the time that you were born and up until now. Then go back and list all of the positive experiences that you've had in your professional life, your job, your career, every positive experience that you can think of. Just write it down on a piece of paper. Then think of all the positive things that you've had happen to you in your spiritual walk. Likewise, I want you to do the same thing with your that has happened in the withdrawal experiences in those 3 areas of your life. And what you're going to find is, what's going to happen is, from that, you're going to see that there will be some patterns that will be consistent, that's going to help you clearly and accurately identify what your calling and your purpose is. And I want to end with this. I want to end with this thought here. Again, the reason you want to do this is because of how God, the pattern in the Bible, and we're going to use Peter. I'm going to have a timeline of Peter's life to show us how God actually uses and patterns for him to reveal his identity, our personal identity, and his purpose and his destiny. Now, keep in mind, and the reason we don't want to look at this part of our lives a lot of times is because it's so painful. But here's the thing that we need to know, that the very painful things in our lives are very critical to what God is calling us to do. The areas where you've been most attacked is the area where God is actually calling you in most cases. There's a biblical example of that. And the quality of your opposition is a revelation of really who you are. The very thing that you're struggling with most is almost a true indication of who you really are and who God is calling you to be. And what you're going to find out is, when you weigh the areas where you've been challenged and you look at the areas where you've had success, there's going to be some commonality that you're going to find in those 2 areas. And it's going to make it real easy for you to be able to create this purpose statement that we're going to be doing. Okay? Let's close, but before we close, I want to do something. A person just walked in, young lady, Ariana, who is the granddaughter of Sister Shanita Neal, who just celebrated her homegoing a few months ago. Her granddaughter is in transition, impacted by the life of Shanita Neal, and she's getting ready to go on to pursue her calling, her purpose that God has actually created her to do. She's going to be leaving in a couple of days, going to Job Corps. And this is a major move in this family system. I believe Ariana, like myself, I believe she's a transitionary person in her family system to fulfill a great calling and purpose on her life. Let's give her a love deposit this morning. And so, good to see you, Ariel. Okay, so we're dismissed. Let's get ready for worship.